About free money. Free money. Maybe. But we're going to talk about what's the point. And what is the point? If we can find free money, what is the purpose of it? Because otherwise it's not actually going to function as quote unquote additional capital, free money or time or energy or effort. Those are all currencies. Okay, so that brings us to TGA concepts, recapture and reallocate. This is going to be a public video. There will be a deeper dive for Wolfpack leaders and guardians. We'll get into that into just a minute. And Recapture and Reallocate is part of the Full Certainty series with Certainty U. The Full Certainty series is and will be available to Wolfpack leaders and guardians. So know that this is a small part of a larger strategy or methodology. But given the market conditions and people are in a tight spot and they're looking for more, they're always looking for more. And frankly, they're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. So I think the most useful thing that we can do right now is get this out to the public and show them where they might be stepping over the dollars so they could pick them up and create some buffer. But again, there has to be a point to it. Otherwise, we'll just hemorrhage it. And I'll explain that in a minute. The foundation is the solvable problem, which means if you don't understand the solvable problem, if you haven't heard about the solvable problem, you're going to want to go back and at least understand that conceptually first. Solvable problem is trademarked by Certainty U, Dan Nicholson. It's a 10-year-old methodology that's just now starting to really get out there because the impact is so huge. So the question is, do you feel like you need more of something? Resources, time, attention, money, energy, effort. This acronym, TAMMEE, T-A-M-M-E-E, I got from Joe Polish. You could also use timer, time, identity, money, energy, reputation. Whatever currencies you value, you may feel like you need more of them. And if you only had more, you could get more. If I had more money, I could make more money. If I had more time, I could do the things that'll free me up more time or make more money. That is not true. I disagree. And let me explain why. You do not need more of something. You don't have to go find more of something. You already have it. You're just hemorrhaging it. You need to recapture what is being wasted and reallocate it to acquiring more of that resource. Okay, and I'll explain that shortly. So again, stop hemorrhaging what you do have, the time that is being wasted, the money that is slipping through cracks, the energy that is not going towards your solvable problem or something productive. If you recapture that and you can reallocate it to the most important thing, that thing will create more of the resources that you're looking for. And I'll explain that in a minute. And so we want to recapture, reallocate, stop hemorrhaging it, redirect. Okay? So this is either to create more resources or, in our methodology, fund a priority, which again, solvable problem. Got to go back to that. I'll explain that shortly. We're going to start with a very simple method. This is one of the many ways we recapture and reallocate. It's called the 2 Oreo principle. Okay? The concept, again, comes from Dan Nicholson, who realized that he'd gained a little bit more weight than he wanted to, and it's a byproduct of years of just thinking he could eat a couple Oreos a day. It's no big deal. The point being, these little things that seem like nothing, if they continue over time, they add up to being significant, but they fly under the radar, so we're not totally aware of them. So when we do 2 Oreo principle, we actually sit down with a business or an individual and pull all financial records, bank statements, et cetera, and find the expenses that have accumulated, redundant softwares and stuff like that, and recapture those funds. You know, you have I know people that have 4 Netflix accounts that they just forgot about, and they're paying for all 4. They only use 1. Cancel 3 of them, recapture that. It seems insignificant, but it actually becomes a pretty large thing. And I'm going to stick with me when I walk through this math. So most recently, business owner had the solvable problem of, in order for me to solve the things that I want out of life, I believe that I would need $7 million in 6 years. That is a core capital number. Solvable problem is a core capital number, which means if I could make an additional $7 million in 6 years, then I would be good. I'd be able to fund everything that's important to me, probably retirement. I wouldn't have to work. I'd probably still continue to work, but I wouldn't have to. Kids' college, potential, paying off house, retiring spouse, all that stuff. $7 million in 6 years. Yours will be completely different. Do not just copy somebody else's solvable problem. That defeats the purpose. This is a successful business owner that just has identified, I need an additional $7 million in 6 years. Now watch this. By going through the 2 Oreo principle, eliminating redundant softwares, masterminds they weren't using, etc., mostly recurring costs, they were able to recapture $50,000 a month. Again, this is a high revenue company. You may not have $50,000 a month. You may have $5,000 a month. That is not insignificant. You may have $600 a month. It is not insignificant to recapture that. Okay, so $50,000 a month was recaptured. That goes straight to the bottom line. That's profit. So let's do some math on this 2 Oreo principle. And this is just one of the many, many, many levers you can pull to recapture. And then I'll show you how to reallocate. $50,000 a month. Is that better than your best salesperson? I'm going to make an argument that it probably is. Here's why. If you recapture $50,000 a month in stuff that was just slipping through the cracks, and again, you have your own numbers, and we assume 20% profit margins. Your profit margins may be different. They may be much lower if you're in a commodity service. They may be much higher if you're in like a service provider industry. But we're going to assume 20% profit margins for the case of this exercise. So $50,000 recaptured straight to the bottom line is the equivalent of $250,000 in sales. So if you're thinking, man, if I could make $250,000 in sales, my problems would be solved, there's actually a much faster, easier way to get the same result. Because $250,000 in sales with a 20% profit margin, that's $50,000 that you actually have to spend or allocate to something else. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Oftentimes, much bigger impact in recapturing before trying to get more. Okay, so again, you don't need more sales. You can actually just recapture what is being hemorrhaged, and that'll be far more efficient than additional sales. Same math here, $50,000 recaptured, equivalent to $250,000 of sales. Now, this does not account for the resources that go into the sale. Advertising dollars, sales commission, the headache of managing the salespeople, the cost of delivery, the risk of delivery, the time it's going to take to deliver. All of that's not even accounted for. So if we accounted for all of that, I'm pretty sure that recapturing will almost always outperform your best sales methods, whether that's a sales page or a salesperson or whatever. And this is true for individuals as well, income instead of sales. Okay. So hopefully that kind of highlights a little bit of the power of recapturing, going back and just plugging the holes in the leaky bucket. You can't do it all the time, but every now and then we want to go back, especially in a market. It is December 11th, 2022, and in today's market, this is one of the most powerful things to do when people are not buying as much. Money is not flowing, but that's okay because we can recapture what we were able to hemorrhage in the past. All right, so there's 2 ways to process this $50,000 a month. The first one is how much more? So $50,000 a month, how much more is that? And there's kind of a shock value here. So you can just pull up any kind of compound interest calculator, say $50,000 a month. Now you probably get some sort of return. Let's say you get 12%. My base case is far more than that. Yours might be a little bit less. You might be more conservative. Maybe you get more in your business. Maybe you expect 22% or whatever. So you're going to do this for yourself. But if I have $50,000 a month, and on average, I expect to get 12% on wherever I allocate my money in 6 years, and 6 months, whatever, 6 years. And that $50,000 a month that I recaptured was monthly, so I'm going to reallocate it to other places. Okay. Calculate. So I actually added $5.3 million with just this 2 Oreo exercise. $50,000 a month, recaptured at 12%, is $5.3 million in the timeline that I determined was appropriate for me. Yours might be different. You might be on a 1 year, a 5 year, a 10 year. Obviously, the longer, the better, because we're talking about compounding interest. Okay, but you got your stuff, whatever your stuff is. So again, $5.3 million was recaptured. Okay. Now, even if you had, you didn't invest it, you just stashed it somewhere, you'd still recover $3.6 million, $50,000 a month for 6 years. So that's how much more. Hopefully that drives a point home. Now, we don't operate from more. We actually operate from how much closer. So we're considering effort, risk, options, what we call certainty, which is a version of the probability and reality that I actually get what I want. I've already determined that I need, in this case, $7 million in 6 years. That would solve the things that matter to me, because all that matters from the Guardian Academy methodology, which was adopted from the Certainty U methodology, is that I just want the things that I want to get out of life, and they're my things. I don't care what anybody else wants. I want my things, and this is what makes me happy. Okay, so the question is, how much closer to getting what I want in a timeline that I deem appropriate am I? So we got to, again, consider effort, risk, options, because that informs behavior. That tells us how to behave in a way that's going to get us the things that we want, which is what the certainty operating method is all about. Certainty operating system. Okay, so let's say $7 million by May 31st, 2029. And we could actually make this, it's January 1st, 2029. It's closer to 6 years there. Okay, let's say we've got $90,000 sitting there, and I can put in an extra $60,000 a month the way that I'm sitting right now. This could be different for you. I'm just using these examples. So we calculate that in order for me to get what I actually want out of life in a timeline that is appropriate, I need to get 24.4% on my money. That's going to be higher risk stuff. You can't just like put it in a 4% savings account and get what you want. So in this scenario, we have to take some risk. It might be growing your business. You might be able to drive your tax rate down, for example, and then you would need 14%. So now we can start figuring out how to get the highest probability of getting what we actually want. So I'm going to assume 40% tax rates. If you know Dan Nicholson, then he could drive that down much lower, but we're just going to use this as an example. All right. So let's say this is where I'm at. Now I do the 2 Oreo principle and I find $50,000 a month. So I can add $50,000 to my initial investment because I just found it and it's recurring. So I can add $50,000 a month here. All right, let's see how this changes the math. Calculate. Boom. That 2 Oreo principle alone in this scenario means I don't have to get a return. I do not have to take an additional risk. I can if I want to. But this like, oh, I need more actually goes away. The highest probability that you achieve what you want to achieve given your preferences and the data at hand is actually putting this in the safest investment possible. And now it's very possible that you have a much higher solvable problem. Okay, so we're going to have to take more risk. We might have to see if we can drive the tax rate down, recover another $20,000 a month, and then get 21% on our money, right? So what we're doing here is instead of saying, wow, how much more is this? We're saying, how much closer am I? And we may find that if we can recapture and reallocate, that we're going to need a much lower return than expected. It takes a lot of pressure off. Okay. So the problem is if you just do more, there is never enough. You can recapture all this free money, quote unquote free money, and you're just going to keep looking for bigger and bigger numbers. It doesn't really inform you when to take less risk, when to modify your behavior. Okay. So use whichever one you want. You want to chase more, that's fine. That's not what we do. We can't help you with that. But if you want to focus on closer, go back to solvable problem, figure out your solvable problem, and then we can recapture and reallocate strategically. All right. So how does this work? If you are talking about investing and funding stuff, you can just do this exercise. If you're talking about solving a really complicated problem, like scaling a business or something, or building a life that's a little more complex, there's a lot of moving pieces that require a lot of resources, we could prioritize by constraint. Okay, so imagine a kinked hose, and I'm going to draw a really bad kinked hose. So imagine there is a hose. Okay. There we go. That's the bottom. And this is the top. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve the throughput, which means we're putting resources in and we want to get a bigger outcome out here, increase the throughput of our efforts and our resources. We got this problem and this problem. These are all kinks in the hose. These are all things that are slowing us down. What we tend to do is we tend to try to solve them all at the same time. So you got resources going here, you got resources going here, you got resources going here, so on and so forth. So in the case of a complex system like this, or a large, ambitious goal, we want to get all these resources, time, effort, and energy, recapture them, and reallocate them to the most immediate constraint, right? So we recapture all these resources and put it toward the restraint that is going to free up the most of the resource that we want. If we want more time, if we want more money, if we want more energy, we need to be able to identify the constraint that, if removed, will give us the most additional time, effort, and money. Okay? So we recapture all these resources that are going into things that are important, but they're not the most immediate constraint. We recapture all those resources and we reallocate them to the most immediate constraint, because once this constraint is removed, it increases the throughput. We have more resources, and then we can solve the next constraint, and so on and so forth. Okay? So it's not even just a lack of resources. It may just be a mismanagement of resources that we want to recapture and reallocate to the most immediate constraint. Again, if you're a Wolfpack leader, Alpha Wolf, or Guardian, we'll kind of walk through some of these things. So we recapture the waste, we prioritize by constraint, and then we reallocate to the most immediate constraint. That's it. And by reallocating to the most immediate constraint, removing that constraint unlocks more resources. We didn't have to go out and find them somewhere. We just had to unlock them by recapturing and reallocating. I hope that makes sense. Which frees up more time, attention, money, effort, energy. And then you come up to another kink in the hose or another thing that you want to buy, and you recapture, reallocate again. And you just repeat that over and over and over. It's not a matter of, oh, if only I had more. Well, stop wasting what you have and reallocate it. That will typically unlock anything within reason. Okay, so where do I look? And again, I'm going to deep dive on this with Wolfpack leaders and Guardians, and we'll do some workshops and stuff. But here's some places just to get you started, because all this free content is really for people that are self-starters that could take it, run with it, and just, maybe they can't afford or don't have the desire to come into programs or climb tiers, and that's okay. I'm still trying to give you the kind of a reference guide to get started. So the CCA framework is 3 rhythms. This is where I'm going to look first. Okay, business, industry, and this is supposed to say personal. I don't know why it says industry twice. Business, industry, and personal. Okay. We're looking at business. So business rhythm are business decisions that you could be allocating. So 2 Oreo principle, you're paying for 6 softwares and you only use 1. It's redundant. Industry rhythm is like tax deadline or New Year's resolutioners or Black Friday. Those are things that are just part of your industry that you can't change. And your personal rhythm is really just personal to you. So a business rhythm, we might look at credit card processing fees. You might be paying 4%. And you can make a tiny change and get it down to 1%. Now, 3% might not seem like a big deal, but if you're doing $3 million in revenue a month, that's $90,000 a month that's getting recaptured. That's a business decision. Redundant softwares, ineffective advertising. Somebody keeps telling you got to run this kind of ads, and there's no evidence that it's working. Stop running those ads. Recapture that capital and reallocate it to something else. It could be sales calls. Spending all day on sales calls, closing a small percentage, you might want to recapture all of that time and reallocate it somewhere else. Those are business decisions, the way that you've decided to build your business. Industry, you're going to see natural deadlines. So we know that fitness industries are going to boom from New Year's resolutioners. So what are we doing to capture that? And then how are we ensuring that we aren't hemorrhaging resources? Tax industry, accounting industry is going to have a tax deadline. E-com's going to have Black Friday, so on and so forth. So we want to look at what decisions are we making based on industry rhythms, and where are we hemorrhaging resources because we don't understand it's an industry rhythm. So for example, in a fitness industry, you might have a huge influx of potential clients for New Year's resolution, and then you hire a bunch of people on salary. Near the end of the year, when the resolutioners stop coming in, you might be hemorrhaging on payroll, just trying to pay the salary that is a byproduct of the industry rhythm. Okay, so we want to look at that. How do we recapture that? How do we reallocate it? And personal, there's way too many things that we can talk about there. Just understand yourself. Know, are there times where I binge? Are there times where I purge? Are there times where I make unnecessary purchases or waste unnecessary energy? And can we recapture that and reallocate it to the most immediate constraint or an investment vehicle? And of course, live to learn, give to earn, which means I hope you implement this. I hope you try it. Don't just know about it, actually do it. That's the live to learn. And then give to earn. You're going to see guardians, you're going to see CCA students, you're going to see all kinds of people on social media and otherwise turning around and sharing this. That's my hope anyway. I hope you implement it, and I hope you share it, and I hope you do your 6-word updates and go into your communities. And if you recapture 10 grand a month and reallocate it to something useful, I hope you share that with other people and teach them. That's what we're here for. Live to learn, give to earn. That's what we're all about. Hope that was useful. Again, recapture, reallocate. There will be a much deeper dive in the Guardian Academy, and of course in the CCA. We're always working on this stuff.